Ba-doom. Hello, everybody. Everybody out there. Welcome to our live discussion of The Last Story of Mina by Nancy Jooyoun Kim. We are excited to talk about this. I'm Margaret Pinard. You're on my channel, so you probably know who I am. But who's this? Oh, there we go. Who's this?
Here we go. Sandy Gholston, BookTube. Just excited to be here to talk about this book. It just was one that popped up. I think book of the month. It popped up, and I just saw it, and I just gravitated toward it. And I was just excited to pick this one up. And then when Margaret and I started comparing notes about what would be a book that we could read that we both already had, this was the one that popped up, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah. Did you get to choose? So I thought book of the month was like you get a book in the mail that they choose for the month. Do you actually get to choose among the list?
Yeah, you do. You get to choose from, I think it's 5 or 6 books, feature selections, and then they have some other selections that you can choose from as well. So you get to pick one of the feature selections. And this one was from last month. And so, yeah, I saw it, picked it up, and it was great. Book of the month has been good. I've actually
pretty solid.
They always have. I don't know how they do it and keep so many people happy, but they somehow manage to find at least one book that everybody's at least reasonably satisfied. And if you're not satisfied, you can just, roll your credit over to the next month. So I haven't had to do that yet, thankfully.
Nice. Very cool. So did you know it was a Reese's Book Club pick? Did that influence your decision at all?
I did not know it was a Reese's Book Club pick until I got the book. And so here's the weird thing that happens when I get a book that I'm getting ready to read. I dabble in the comments about the book and the background about the book, but I try not to get too deep because once I start reading comments, I want to read more and more and more and more of the comments.
Oh, okay.
Was that? Yeah, like Amazon or Goodreads, the comments that people make after they read the book. But then sometimes you stumble into spoilers, and I don't want to get into the spoilers when I'm getting ready to read a book, at least not to a deep degree, like they give away the ending or something like that. So yeah, I did not know.
I'll do that before I read it.
Yeah, it is dangerous. And actually, it's interesting because it ruined a book that I was really excited about reading, and somebody was upset and gave away the ending, and that kind of ruined it for me. I still ended up buying the book because it was a flash sale on Amazon for $1.99 Kindle, so I bought it anyway, and I'll probably still read it. But no, I did not know that, but I was glad to know that. And then after I read the book, I gorge on the comments and just eat up the comments as much as I can. 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star comments. I just go all in.
On Goodreads.
And Amazon, yeah. Well, I just, I want to know, what people said, positive, negative, neutral-ish, and what kind of crazy stuff people say that doesn't make any sense, and what kind of things that people say that are actually insightful and make some sense. And so, yeah, I just, I did. I just pigged out on them. After I finished the book, I just went crazy reading the comments.
That's funny. That's like not what I do at all. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to people's opinions when I see the book show up on TBRs and wrap-ups and sort of like reading reviews on BookTube. But like every once in a while, I look at Goodreads reviews when I put mine up to see what other people thought. But I don't like it influencing me beforehand because the spoilers, but also just because like every once in a while I do and I see something and it kind of puts me off the book and I'm like, well, I already bought it. Now I don't want to read it. Dangerous.
Yeah, I've had that happen a few times where I read too many comments beforehand, and there was a book that I was just really just gassed up to read, and then all of a sudden you start like 10 people give the same negative comment, and you're just kind of like, I don't know. I do have this other book that might be kind of cool. Maybe I'll go to that one. And then that book that you were excited about, it just slides down your list, deeper and deeper and deeper down the list until one day you have to pick it up off the bookshelf and blow the dust off of it. And because a friend of a friend said something positive about it, and you decide, hey, maybe I will check it out.
Yeah, it's funny how books can disappear into the TV.
Yes, I do. And I have a cave of books, actually 3 caves of books in our house. So that's how that goes.
Lucky. So I saw this on the Libro list as a bookseller, and so I saw the cover, which was very pretty and caught my eye, and then I read the small description, and it was I think the mother-daughter relationship, the immigrant theme, and the different parts of the U.S. and how it grows in that, or doesn't grow in that area of how it treats immigrants and how immigrants experience America, and I thought that would be really good. Yeah, so let's dive in, although I hate it when people say that. Sorry. I know. Okay, we've got our friend Elizabeth commenting. She says she reads maybe 5 reviews at most. Let's see, pop it up there. Reads does tend to make good decisions, so she agrees. And then on the reviews, doesn't read them till after. Try to remember to do it before. Yeah. Interesting. All right. So I sent out some sort of like starter questions. The first one was about the structure. It's a dual narrative. Did you like one storyline more than the other? We were talking a little bit about this in the green room. Which one and why?
Yeah, I was, it's interesting because once I started reading the comments afterward, I was curious if people thought the same as I did. And I think for the most part, people did. And I think Mina's storyline for me was very interesting because you got obviously more of the immigrant experience. And then you also got the experience of Los Angeles in the 80s versus Los Angeles in the current times, which was kind of cool to me because in the 80s is just before the Rodney King verdict, before the riots, and you get kind of the build up, the tension build up a little bit. You can kind of feel that. And then afterward, when it comes to the more current storyline, you kind of get the feel of what happened after that. So it's kind of interesting that really tumultuous period was kind of right in the middle of the 2 Los Angeles storylines. But I think the immigrant experience and the struggle, and I think her personality and how she was kind of coping with it, plus all the obvious stuff that was going on that comprises the mystery. It just was really intriguing. But I think the immigrant experience and adjusting to life in this country with all the other baggage that she had from her past in Korea.
Yeah, and just, we're going to try to be non-spoilery. I said for the first half, so maybe we'll be a little ahead of time. We're trying to be non-spoilery for the first half, and then you may want to come back. So again, as I was saying, I usually end up liking one storyline better, but on this, I liked them equally after a certain point. So at the beginning, when I was listening to this, I was kind of annoyed with the daughter's story because I was like, okay, lots of detail, lots of angst, and why? What are we waiting for? And so knowing what's going to happen to be the inciting incident, I was like, what's happening? Why is it so slow? But then after maybe a third of it, I was like, oh, okay, now I'm seeing the missed opportunities and the signals that make it so, heartbreaking and you want them to succeed and stuff. So I like them both.
Yeah, I think Margot, kind of grows on you over the course of the story a little bit more. At least for me, she kind of grew on me a little bit more in some ways. I became a little bit more interested toward the back end of the story with where she was going, and which probably logically makes sense with the way that the story actually, the arc of the story, how everything plays out. But she grew on me a little bit. I mean, but again, I was the immigrant angle and the coping mechanisms that Mina had as she was going through all this stuff, whether it was through her eyes, her storyline, or it was through Margot's storyline. I think was really intriguing to me.
Cool. What did you think of the structure? How did it affect pacing? Was there a satisfying arc or ending? Without being spoilery.
The pacing, one of the biggest criticisms that I usually have of books, and people come at me all the time and we argue about this, is I tend to think stories are too long sometimes, and that if I'm an editor, I'm I would chop. I'd be a hard editor. Authors would probably not like me very much because I would be well, I think you could chop about 70 pages off here, and this would flow a lot better. What's that?
From the Daniel Brown part or from the middle?
There were parts, I think, I would say the back end of the second act, I think into the third a little bit, I think where it kind of dragged a little bit for me, just a little bit, not to the point that I even remotely considered DNFing, but it kind of dragged a little bit. But I felt much better once I kind of got back on track and the story kind of picked up for me a little bit. Actually, ironically, the Margot's parts toward the back end of the book, I think really picked up for me.
Yeah.
I think that's what that held my attention, because I kind of got a feel for where the story was going. I think everybody says, "Oh yeah, I knew how it was going to end," like 3 pages in. But I kind of got a little bit of a feel closer toward that part where I was starting to drag a little bit, and that was more than enough that made me want to really see how the book was going to end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took about, I think, 2/3 of the way through the story before it started feeling like a mystery. Before that, yes. It was more like literary and malaise and sort of, I don't know, yeah, a little too esoteric for my stage. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I think the because when I was people were talking about it is mystery thriller, and then for at least half of it, I was kind of like, okay, all right. We're gonna get there. I'm sure we're gonna get there at some point, And I was I'm just like, patience, Sandy, patience. You know how this goes sometimes, and there was a payoff. I think in terms of being patient and getting toward that last the back half of the last act of the story. I think the patience paid off.
Mm-hmm. All right, your turn for a question. Pick a question.
All right, let me pull up my handy dandy list of questions here. We talked. I mentioned a little bit about the genre a little bit. The various settings was a question that we discussed beforehand, and this was an interesting question to me because I like one of the compliments that I think I hear that's really good is like you feel like you were there, like you were able to experience the settings. How did you feel about the settings? Were you able to kind of get a feel for the scene, where things were and how things were playing out?
Mm-hmm. I grew up in California, but not Los Angeles. So I've never been to Koreatown, but I have been around that area and Culver City, sort of like suburbs, and the details were very real, but very poetic. So I felt like it was believable as a setting, the different time periods. And there were lots of details that were about like daily rituals, daily life, where you went, what you saw. But there were also these pluck some moment out of Korea in the 1950s or 1960s that was like, ooh, you get a feeling, not necessarily like you were there, but like a mood or a poem just came into your view. And I liked that. It is a different style. And because I was listening to it on the audiobook instead of reading it, the voice was very affecting for that. At the beginning, I think part of the reason why I had a hard time getting into the book at the beginning was the voice is very poetic, and it seems like a strange way to deliver this novel. Yeah. And so I actually had to speed it up. I've never sped up. I've heard people talk about it now, like Bethany, but I had never sped up an audiobook, but I did it to 1.25 and it was clipped, but at least it felt like a normal pace for reading rather than there is always something to deliver on the, it. So yeah, I had to shorten it and then it felt more like a setting rather than a poem. But how about you?
Yeah. And that could be an interesting segue into, I think there's a question that we have there about the book format and how that played a role in it. And that's interesting because when you said that about listening to the audiobook, I thought about, that could give a very different perspective than reading the physical copy of the book. I think the physical copy of the book, I'm kind of with you. I didn't feel like I was so much there, but I felt like the setting helped the rest of the story make sense. That helped the story kind of help the pay. If that makes sense, it kind of helped the story flow and make sense. And it didn't hurt or slow the story down. I think it helped it quite a bit. But it wasn't one of those stories where you read it and you're this setting and you feel like you're there. Like the oppressive heat of the sun beat down and their skin was melting off and the feet were sore from walking for 5 straight days with no water. So you didn't necessarily feel that way, but you did kind of get it. It did a nice job of complementing the story and the pace of the story and the characters, the personalities of the characters.
There were a few moments I can remember actually that felt very visceral, very sensual. There was the scene at the Ferris wheel where she says several times in her memories, Mina talks about this. She says the taste of hot chocolate and salt water and the that in the air. And then also when she's talking about her grocery store gifts in her little basket where like the perfect Asian pear and like the little tree left. And it's just like, I can taste that. I know what the Asian pear tastes like. And yeah, it's really, really nice. Really nice to know.
And I think that goes into, I really like the writing. And I think a lot of times we kind of forget to talk about the actual writing. And then some people kind of go overboard with the writing, like, oh man, I hated it, or I really, really loved it. But I liked the way it was written, the actual writing, which was really enjoyable for me. And I think that helped with the flow, even though again, that part where it kind of dragged for me a little bit before we really got to the climax of the story. But I thought it was really well written. I definitely my compliments to the author. I thought she did a really nice job.
Yeah. All right. So I think we venture into the spoilery part, but we'll be in as little spoilers as possible. Character. Who's your favorite character? Why? I think you've already kind of done this. And what about who was pitted against each other?
I think Mina was my character because I really felt her emotion. She had just some amazingly powerful emotions that just you can't help but affect her life, and just even from some of her earliest memories. And so that really walked with her, and I really just find myself feeling her emotions. But then you have Margot, and Mina and Margot don't have maybe that classic mother-daughter type of relationship that you would think that they would have. And so in a way, they were almost fighting against each other in a way, fighting to be together and then fighting to have their own independence in some ways. And so it was really interesting trying to get a feel for that. And I think maybe the dual storyline, I don't know. I don't know how well that worked with the dual storyline, as if it would have been just a straight third person narrative throughout kind of a traditional storyline. But I don't know. That was a verbal vomit right there to digest. But yeah, it was just her Mina was definitely more was intrigued me more. So I was really excited about that. And then kind of the interaction as it was portrayed between the mother and daughter.
Yeah, Mina's story arc seems very tragic, and Margot's story arc seems like the breakthrough, So I feel like it was satisfying at the end. Both resolutions to me were like, oh yes, like sort of, like still with that like looking back regret kind of feeling, I really liked Miguel, like the sidekick, Margot's friend, but also like some comic relief. And I thought Mr. Kim was done really well in terms of introducing the character at the very beginning and developing from Mina's point of view what she saw of him and how that changed as she got more and better.
Miguel was interesting. I agree. The comic relief part, it was just like it's like, whoa, we're getting really tense. We're getting really tense. This is really like a hardcore story. And then Miguel's like kind of loosens it up a little bit. It's kind of like, okay, you can breathe a little bit, or you can laugh a little bit. And so yeah. I think he was a very important character in that story, if for no other reason than for that point.
I feel like Miguel is to Margot as not Officer Troy, as Mrs. Peck is to
Mrs. Peck, yep.
Mina. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they can depend on when there's like nothing else.
She was a very fascinating character too, getting toward the end when you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel of what's happening, and her personality and how she stayed in character quite a bit. And it was an interesting character. It was like trying to break down a wall to the truth is on the other side of the wall. Now, how do you get through the wall to get to the actual truth? And so Margot is just kind of pounding away at that wall for quite a bit of the story. She's got a sledgehammer and she's hammering away at the wall. But it was I liked the ending. I thought the ending was the last book that I read. I don't know if it was the last, but one of the recent books that I read, a very unsatisfying ending. I loved like 9.5 tenths of the story, and then it got to the ending, and I just did not like the ending. And I'm pretty stingy with stars when I rate, so I chopped off like 1 star automatically for that. And so I think it ended up being 3.5 or 4 stars or whatever it was. But it was a good story. This one, it was satisfying. I think the story really came to I think a good solid end, where you did not feel cheated by the time you got to the end. Yeah, it's a lengthy book. I mean, it's a pretty hefty book. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think it was pushing up to 400 pages, so it was a pretty hefty book.
Yeah, it wasn't as long as some audiobooks I've listened to, but that was sped up. So.
But you were smart, because I almost always go to 1.25 when I do audiobooks. I almost bought the audiobook for this one, but I already had the physical book that I bought, and then I had then I bought the Kindle book, and I'm like, okay, how much money do I want to invest in this? Yeah. I mean, Nancy, I like you, but I was just like, I don't know if I want to invest another $10 into that book. So, but yeah, it was. I think it was a satisfying ending. I did not feel cheated at all.
Elizabeth saying she's thinking of reading this in time to watch the next buddy read. Is that if we do the next read, that'll be a different book though? So is it this book or the next one that you're talking about? We don't know what the next one will be.
So you know what we have to do? We have to get Elizabeth. What we have to do is we have to find a book that all three of us want to read, and then we can just we can go 3-way and have a 3-way buddy read here. So we just gotta. Then again, it was challenging for the two of us to find a book.
That ventures into the read-along territory, and then you get to people who want to like divvy up chapters and stuff, and then it's like, whoa, too structured. I can't do this. Yeah.
You get too many. I've seen some of these buddy reads where there's like 10 people on there. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of buddies,
Yeah. One of the points I was going to bring up about pitting people against each other was at some point I felt like the tension was pulled to the surface of the Korean immigrants in that grocery store versus the Mexican immigrants in that grocery store. And it threw up all these red flags to me about how our system is working today in terms of the people at the top saying, I'm going to take most of the stuff, but you know what? Here's some crumbs. Why don't you fight over it? And it's just like exactly the power structure we have today.
It is very, very, that's a great point. It's very similar to that. Because actually when you first started mentioning that, what I thought of is that tension buildup that we talked to leading up to the Rodney King beating, the Rodney King trial, and then the riots that happened all in pretty quick succession. And then before the O.J. Simpson thing where everybody got all fired up again. So I was just thinking about these brewing tensions, these ethnic tensions that were already taking place in Los Angeles. And so I started to think about that too. But then you're right. When you think of the social hierarchy and how, you have, the top, 3% that controls so much. And then you've got all these others that are fighting over, what's left. And so it was, it leads to inevitable tension. between groups because you identify with your group. They speak your language. In these cases, they speak your language. They share your culture, your interest in food, your interest in reading, your history. So that was really you could definitely feel the tension there at parts of the book.
Yeah, and yet actually one of the lines that gets repeated several times is Margot's memory of her mother really using more Spanish than English because that's who she worked with and who she sold to in her various businesses. And when she would be at the swap meet when Margot was growing up, she'd be calling out to customers saying, "Amiga, amiga," and like coming over to buy. And that voice, I mean, I listened to it, so it's got this particular resonance of that, like, that nasal sort of like Korean accent, but calling amiga and trying to be understood by another population to make it, survive. And it was just like this, that one line that was repeated held so much resonance for me. It's one of those moments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and now that I think about it, just language in general, because you got Margot speaking Korean and then, communicating with her mom. And then they had that kind of thing going there a little bit too. Connected, mom's connected to the old country and where she grew up. And then you have the Americanized daughter. And then mom's working, with Mexicans speaking Spanish. So it's like, there's a lot of things going on here that it was really just intriguing to kind of follow that, just the blending of the cultures that she was going through, and then her emotions, what she was going through was just like incredible. Like you're picturing, like when I picture what she looks like, I'm picturing like 5'2" and like just yet carrying all this everything on her shoulders and in her mind and in her heart. It's just amazing.
Yay. Yeah, totally. All right. The title. How did the title hit you after reading the book?
The title after reading the book?
Well, you can compare. You can contrast like what you thought it was going to be and then.
Yeah, I think before reading the book, I pictured kind of like a 1980s crime show with a murder or a death that takes place, and then you work backwards to the present. You work past to the present. So you go back in time and then you build up to the event that took place. And so that's what I was picturing. And it started out that way, So her coming in and the horror of the discovery that she made, that Margot made, that sets the stage for the rest of the book. So I know I'm dancing on the line of spoilery right now. So
well, that's in the blurb. Like that's in the blurb. So I was actually waiting for that to happen. Without reading your comments. So I think that's fine. Margot discovers her mother's dead. So
yeah. So how horrifying is that? Even when you think of the relative lack of interaction between the two, Seattle to Los Angeles, it still kind of struck me there. I don't think afterward, I don't know that it changed my perspective that much in terms of the title. I think I pretty much felt the same way about it. The title hooked me, to be honest with you. I saw it right away and I was kind of like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then, to try to read about, to try to diversify my reading interests, it really just grabbed me to at least give it a look. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the author, the editor, the publisher, they did their job. I mean, they did what they needed to do to get me to not only pick it up, but then to also want to see, what's on the inside cover. So they did what they had to do to get me interested right from the beginning.
Yeah. I don't do too much speculation beforehand because I don't like to prejudice this is going to be this way. My expectation is set. And now if it's not that, I'm going to be like, meh. So I was like thinking maybe she's leaving letters or there's some kind of story that she's passed on somehow that has to be discovered. And if there is, it's only a metaphorical kind, right? It's sort of like the story of her life and how that is redeemed and how it sort of moves forward into the second generation in her family. So I really liked it. I didn't understand it until we got to the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. So I thought that was neat too. Yeah, they did their job.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because I wouldn't have been surprised if I would have saw it that way. Like she would discover that her mom has passed away, and her mom in her strong box or will or whatever, she left this mysterious letter, and you have to follow all these directions to solve the mystery. Yeah. So it could have. It put just enough of an interest there and question marks floating around in my head and in front of my face about what is the last story? What is her last story?
Yeah. Which
themes? What anything that just grabbed you, that just really hooked you?
Well, one of the things that I was putting at the end of my reviews for this was like, it made me so hungry because it really uses the language of Korean food to express love. Like that's the only way I feel like Margot's memories at the beginning connect her with her mom and love in any way. And so every time she would describe something, I'd be like, oh man. So actually after, like right at the end of when I was finishing this, I was like super craving Korean food. And I don't want to drive out to the suburbs to get it. So I went to Trader Joe's and just got all the Asian takeout that I could, which is a sad substitute, but what are you going to do?
You know what? You just, you got to do what you can with what you have. And so you got as close as you could get. I agree. I think, when the descriptive and vivid memories that I took away from that, a lot of it did have to do with food. I mean, I think that was where a lot of it was like really descriptive. And those are some of the parts where I felt like I was right there. Like I could almost just like smell it if I really concentrated hard enough. So that's an interesting point in terms of the writer writing it in so you feel like you were there. I think the food part that's a great point.
Yeah. So she's cooking food for her daughter. She's guessing the recipes people are going to make as she scans their things at the grocery store, reciting like green onion, garlic, shoju, all those different things. She goes out on the dates, and like there's food mentioned, and there's her friend Mrs. Peck who is making the panchan at the restaurant and bringing it home, or she's going out, and like, yeah, there's just so much food in this, and it's all. I don't think there's an instance of anything that tastes bad, is there?
Nothing that jumps out at me. Actually, now that you mention it,
it's all positive. Which, I mean, why not? Food is good.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Yeah, I can't think of anything that was like, ew, that was bad, or a character just wasn't feeling something. I don't know, but
except for the tea.
Oh,
at the end.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know why I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was a small blip.
Yeah, I sort of didn't understand what was going on there, but I mean,
that was one of the things. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned that too, because that was one of the things when I went back and I started looking at the comments. That was one of the things I was kind of like deep in the back of my mind. I was like, maybe somebody will say something about that, and we'll Scooby-Doo solve that mystery at the end, and everybody will be happy, and we'll go on to the next episode. But yeah, I was kind of in the back of my mind thinking about, man, maybe somebody has the answer there.
Okay, so tell me, because I put the alert, I've notified people. Tell me what you saw in the comments, because I want to know. Like, there's tea that may have been poisoned. I believe that it's poisoned to make her sick. I believe that male model guy is like ill intent. But why on her? Why push her out? So why that whole thing?
I never really saw anybody address it directly in the comments section, but that's kind of where you went is kind of where I was initially going. I'm kind of like, it kind of was, it was plausible. So that's kind of where I went, but you know, I just when I finally finished the book, it was kind of late at night, and so I didn't penetrate as deeply into the comments. It was like 30 pages of comments, and I'm like, I think I made it through like 3 or 4 pages, and then I tapped out. So I might have to go back and look at some more of those. But yeah, I kind of was. That's kind of where I was going to.
Sounds good. Themes. Did you have other themes that you wanted to bring in and comment on?
Not really. You know, you know, we talked about the food, and then earlier we talked about you know, the settings and the clash of cultures and the diversity. I think those were things that I think were really what interested me in the first place in this book. You know, just to read a little bit more from authors. And part of this was, you know, when I did the videos and I read the book American Dirt, and you know, I wanted to read, you know, authors from different perspectives, and that actually inspired me to want to read more of that because of the controversy around that particular book. And so, but yeah, I just think you know, the settings, current Los Angeles 80s. And then the cultures coming together, and then the immigration issue, and being able to and adjusting to life in America. There's one quote that I had highlighted in my Kindle book. I can't, where she was talking about it. Is this what life is really like in America? And I don't have my Kindle right here in front of me, but I highlighted that part.
Yeah.
And it was like it was a dark part, and you kind of like, wow, is that what it's really like? Anyway, that was those were some things that popped out to me.
Cool. The one of the later questions is more of a theme question, actually. So, what did you think about where the story ended up on the American dream, or the myth, or the sham, as Margot calls it? I really appreciated the exchange that she has with Officer Choi. So yeah. I don't think this is spoilery. She's talking to the policeman who is on the case of like investigating her mother's death, and he's trying to be professional, and she's upset that he's not pursuing the leads or whatever. And she, you know, starts badgering him really on the phone, and says something about he's just part of the sham like everyone else. Yep. Like her mother was a good person. She paid her taxes. She, you know, she deserves more. She deserves better by you, and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point of Mina's first coming to America and having so few opportunities, to her whole life and how that rolled out, to her relationship with her daughter and how that it was sort of torn apart during most of her life.
Yeah.
And then the aftermath, where Margot herself is trying to figure out how much of her life is I don't know, behind a barricade, and what she's going to do about breaking through those and addressing it rather than hiding from it. What did you think about where that ended up and what it said about that?
Well, I think the interaction with Officer Choi was like really powerful. I think Miguel was trying to get her to kind of like just chill out a little bit, you know, because she was going in pretty hard on him, and that really set the stage for a lot of things for me. You know, it just was like it was kind of a pivotal moment, I think, for her and for the story as well, because I think it set the stage for some things that came, because she met with the building manager. You know, there was, you know, resistance there, and you know, I don't want any cops involved. We don't want any cops around here. You know, which is kind of typical of what you see in those kind of stories and in those kinds of settings. We don't want any cops around here. And so, you know, those are some of the barriers that she kept running into to try to get to the actual truth. So yeah, that was pivotal. I'm glad you mentioned that about Officer Choi. That was a powerful interaction there.
Did you like how she met him in the grocery store at the end?
You know, it's interesting because a lot of times they don't close the loop, so to speak. And so it was interesting that the author did that. A lot of times it's like you want them to just kind of close that loop a little bit and just have that interaction again. And so that was cool. That was a cool part that I actually didn't expect that. And when I saw it, I'm kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that she did that.
It was subtle enough. It wasn't, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't overpowering to the point of being cheesy or corny, but it was, but it was good. It was good. I think it was a nice touch.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, I haven't read American Dirt. I watched all the publicity run out and I was like, okay, I've got plenty of books. I don't need to read this one people have an issue with because whatever. But I feel like when you bring those two up, there is a lot in common about the myth of the American dream and the sort of evolution. I find that, and I don't think my parents will be on here watching, so I'll put this deep in the video. I find that when I have conversations with my parents, a lot of the time they have a different frame for what is possible or respectable or the right way to do things, right? So like, here are the steps to get X done. And I find, especially lately in the past few years, excuse me, that I come up more and more often against that and thinking like, well, that was only possible in your generation. That was only possible in the 50s and 60s. And we need to think about things differently and engage differently with people and, change laws, really. So when I think about the American dream, I feel like that was sort of a bubble. I mean, that period that people think about as like post-war growth, it was sort of a bubble that can't be repeated again if we keep going like we're going. And I want to see that, I guess, feeling that people had at the beginning of the country, like the 18th century, about liberty and ideals, like realized just more and more and more as we grow, rather than held on to so tightly for just a few.
Yeah, I mean, those times of optimism of we can build, and we've liberated ourselves from the British, and now we can build something great. One of the things about American Dirt a little bit, but probably even more so about the last story of mine, Mina, is I think the perception of America when you're not there versus when you get there, and you realize that all that glitters is not necessarily gold all the time. And I think that was what her experience was. And I kind of likened it a little bit to the movie Scarface, where he comes to America and America's going to be great, and then he's working at like a taco stand, and he's getting very little money. He's working really hard, and it's just not the American dream that he envisioned. And I think, with Mina, I think that's like, it's the streets are not paved with gold, and so I think that's it's a really interesting perspective. And I think, again, that's where that immigrant experience, it makes me want to dive into more similar type of stories, just to see and hopefully underrepresented authors that have stories to tell, and maybe even more authentic stories to tell, to really kind of break out of comfort zones and be able to read more of not only underrepresented authors, but underrepresented authors telling stories that aren't really told maybe at all, or aren't told as authentically, or aren't told enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for whoever watches whoever watches this video here into the future, feel free to comment like all those stories you would recommend for immigrants.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually have written 3 books in a series that are about the immigrant experience from Scotland to Nova Scotia in the 1820s and 30s. So that's like my interest is there as well. I wanted to say about a large subset of the people who come to America with this dream image are people who already have trauma experiences in their former countries. And so I feel like to realize outside of you that it doesn't live up to the hype, but then also inside the interior to be so clamoring for stability and understanding and, just like a fresh start is a really hard thing. And I think this book did a great job of juxtaposing those two things in a way that makes it very easy to empathize, which I hope more people do.
Yeah, I do too. I think those are common themes. I don't want to get too much into American Dirt, but yeah, those are common themes because they're fleeing something to get to something. So they're almost as much as getting to America, streets paved with gold. They're fleeing something bad, a trauma or something evil that happened. And so I think that's a subtext to a lot of these types of stories, because you don't necessarily see as many stories about the person who's living the charmed life in another country and they just decide to immigrate to another country just to do it.
Yeah.
There's usually a bad backstory of some kind, that set the stage for what's happening. So yeah, I mean it definitely opens my mind and my eyes to different types of stories. The immigrant experience, I think it really fascinates me with these two recent books that I've read. So I'm looking forward to diving into more. And that was one of the arguments with American Dirt, is to read more from underrepresented authors telling more authentic stories. And so that's definitely something that I want to do more of.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. All right, so to sort of wrap up, maybe, I don't know if we have a favorite anything or a word that describes, I can't really do encapsulations like that. I really liked this book. I reviewed it and whatnot, and it sounds like you did too. We're going to ask for recommendations, this sort of similar vein, own voices, that kind of get at these themes that we really enjoy and enjoy learning about. What about what's next? Are you a mood reader, or do you have your list planned out? I'm experimenting with planning out. We're gonna see how it goes.
As far as reading, it's October, so I think you and I discussed it a little bit. I'm reading a few more scarier themed books. Actually, it's a part of it is there's a few older books that I've wanted to read for a while that actually. The timing is actually perfect. A few of Stephen King's older books. I think some of his best stuff is his older stuff. So I'm looking forward to kind of jumping a couple of them. One is Firestarter, because I always liked the movie when I was a kid, even though it was probably shouldn't have been watched. It was probably too scary to watch when I was a kid, but whatever. I watched it anyway.
Wow,
and then
scary for me.
What's that? The Blob? Wow. The Blob?
Scary for me.
I'm trying to think about have I seen The Blob? I think I have seen that before, but yeah, it's so that one and The Shining. The Shining is another one I want to read. A great movie, tremendous movie. Jack Nicholson, great movie. So definitely want to read those two. And I have a couple other ones that I put off, kind of scarier type stories. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I will never watch it.
Here's Johnny.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Okay.
But, yeah, it was creepy, but yeah. So I got a few of those that are coming up, and then some other types of books that I think are more appropriate for Halloween month, the month of October, my birthday month. So just kind of excited to, toward the back end of the month. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm looking at. Just have some fun, looking for some themes, for different times of the year to kind of guide my reading. So that's what's on tap for me.
Oh, yes. Okay. I've been neglecting the comments, but here's a good one. Elizabeth's reading the books from movies that she loves as well. And I know she's on Bookstagram more than YouTube, and she has a little board, a bingo board for reading October reads. Oct Reads Bingo is her hashtag. So that's really fun.
All right. I'm going to have to track Elizabeth down and I have to track her down on Instagram and see if I can connect with her.
So scary books are not my thing, but have you seen Victober traveling around on YouTube? This is Victorian books for October, so that's more my.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. I'll have to go look for it. See, I must be neglecting my BookTube community. I need to go and check that out.
Yeah, there's oh, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 people. There's actually
Wow.
maybe 25 of them got together to create a create your own adventure video series. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Interesting. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
they wrote out a little book, a novella that was like a Victorian novel, and had you choose and go to a different person's video on Kate Howe's page. And
Oh.
I think did most of the arranging and everything. And I was like, this is so clever. This would be like such a headache for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could see some pressure in that. That's interesting. I'm gonna go check that out. I'm pretty intrigued by that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other YouTube plans that you wanted to highlight for the future, the readathons? Or I think we're both like looking for people to buddy read with. So if you're interested in doing something like this in the future with either of us or with one, and trying to find a book, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think yeah, with anybody that wants to jump in, I think you and I can compare reading lists here and see what we have or what we're interested in, and I definitely looking forward to doing this again. I think we planned on like what is it, like 30 minutes or something, 25, 30 minutes, and here we're pushing up on an hour, and it hasn't felt like an hour. I mean, it's just felt like a nice flow, and I'm just really excited about it, and opportunities to just kind of continue to do this more and more, and just to engage with my fellow booktubers, and just to share our mutual love for writing and reading.
Yeah, we'll get more onto that writing piece later, maybe. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a part of my channel as well, and I need to get back into that. I think I'm gonna do the writing challenge in November, so I'm probably gonna jump on that. I think I have to do 50,000 words in November, so we'll see how that goes.
nano.
Yeah, yeah. I've never done it before, so I'm thinking
Okay.
about doing it.
Okay, I've done it 7 times, so we should definitely talk.
7 times. Oh, you are a veteran. So okay, all right. I'm gonna have to lean on you a little bit. So if it's so 50,000 words, which is I've done that before, but it's I'm excited about doing that, getting back into writing a little bit more as well.
Yeah, super fun. Woo! I had this one prepared and I forgot to use it. Exciting. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Sandy, for participating and joining me in
Yeah,
the hosted chat. And look forward to choosing another book, and maybe in between the holidays, we can figure out which one is on both of our lists and entertain the world again.
definitely appreciate you for bringing us together, and it's just been a great opportunity. Elizabeth is talking about Agatha Christie. I've got a pretty good stack of Agatha Christie books, and I think Murder on the Orient Express is the last one I read. I think that was this summer. So I mean, if I have Agatha Christie, I would definitely jump into that.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, we've got some seeds of ideas, and we'll hit you with them later. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, sounds good. Thanks everybody. See you next time.